He pressed a gun to the girl's forehead over a stolen watch. "That belonged to my dead brother," he said, voice cracking like ice. She didn't flinch. "He gave it to me, alive, 2 days before your family put him in the ground." The safety clicked off. Back to the story. The tray hit the floor of Bellamy's diner at 8:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, and every fork in the place stopped moving. Nora Whitfield knelt to gather the shattered plates, apron soaked in gravy, hands shaking so hard the porcelain shards rattled against each other. Table 9 had refused to pay a $41 check, called her a name she wouldn't repeat in front of her daughter, then shoved her hard enough to send the whole order flying: meatloaf, mashed potatoes, 2 glasses of sweet tea, all of it airborne, and then all of it on the checkered floor. $22 in tips, gone in 1 careless second. Rent on the 2-room apartment above the diner was 4 days late. 4 days, and she knew exactly how those days ended, because she'd lived them before. 2 winters ago, a landlord had knocked at 6 in the morning, with a padlock already in his coat pocket. She'd carried Poppy down 3 flights of stairs wrapped in a comforter, while a stranger changed the locks behind them, and Poppy had asked, sleepy and trusting, whether they were going on an adventure. Nora had said yes. She had gotten very good at saying yes to that question. Her daughter Poppy, 6 years old, slept in the back booth with a coloring book under her cheek and a red crayon still loose in her fist. Nora's knees were in the glass. She could feel the small hot bites where it broke skin. She kept her head down and she kept picking up pieces, because if she looked up, she'd cry. And she'd learned a long time ago that crying only told people exactly where to push next. Then the door opened and the temperature in the room dropped. The man who walked in wore a charcoal wool coat that cost more than Nora made in a year, and he moved like the floor belonged to him. Behind him, 2 others fanned out and stood by the windows the way men stand when they're measuring exits, not ordering coffee. The whole diner seemed to inhale at once. Old Mr. Pruitt at the counter set down his fork. Dale, the night manager, went the color of dish rags and vanished into the kitchen. Nora didn't know who the man in the coat was. She only knew that Table 9, the one who'd shoved her, suddenly stood up so fast his chair clattered over backward and bolted for the rear door by the restrooms. He didn't make it. One of the coatman's people caught him by the collar without hurrying, the way you'd catch a falling cup off a shelf, no violence in it, just certainty. And the man in the charcoal coat walked straight through the frozen room, past the fear, past the overturned chair, and stopped in front of Nora, who was still on her knees in the broken glass. His eyes went to her wrist, to the watch there. A man's watch, steel and worn, far too big for her narrow arm, the crystal face scratched cloudy, the leather band held together with a strip of medical tape. "That watch," he said, and his voice was very quiet, which was somehow worse than any shout, "belonged to my dead brother." The diner went silent as a church at midnight. Nora looked up at him. Her knees hurt. Her palms were bleeding a little, and she was so tired, so bone-deep, month after month tired of being pushed and shorted and shoved, that the fear that should have come simply didn't. "He gave it to me," she said, "alive 2 days before you buried him." Something moved behind the man's face. A flinch he couldn't stop, quick as a shutter. "Danny Corrigan," he said. "Say his name to me. Say it right. Danny." Her voice cracked on the single syllable. She looked down at the watch, and the words came slow, because they were the good kind of memory, and she didn't want to spend them all at once. "The first Thursday he ever came in, I gave him the wrong order. Chicken instead of meatloaf. I was so scared I'd get docked, I nearly cried at the register, and he just ate the chicken, cleaned the plate, told me it was the best mistake anybody'd made for him in years." She swallowed. After that it was meatloaf. Booth 4 by the window. Black coffee, no sugar, every Thursday for 11 months. Theo Corrigan did not move, so she kept going. There was a night the power went out on the whole block. Poppy was in the back booth, and she got scared of the dark, and Danny took a candle off table 6 and taught her to make shadow rabbits on the wall until she laughed. Nora's voice dropped. He tipped me $40 on a $9 check, and when I begged him to stop, he said he'd stop the day I stopped, looking like I hadn't slept in a week. He never stopped. She lifted the wrist, the taped band, the tired steel. He gave me this the last Thursday I ever saw him, slid it across the table and said, if things ever went bad, really bad, I should find his brother Theo and show him this, and Theo would know it was real. I didn't know his brother was you. I didn't know his brother was anybody at all. I just needed to survive Thursday to Thursday, same as everyone. Theo Corrigan, because that was who he was, the name that emptied restaurants and stopped raised fists mid-swing across 3 neighborhoods, stood over her, and for one full second, he did not look like the most feared man in the city. He looked like a man who'd just been handed proof that his dead brother had been secretly, quietly kind to a stranger on Thursdays in a diner while the clock ran out on him. He crouched down into the broken glass in his $1,000 coat as though it were nothing. He took her bleeding hand and turned it over, gentle, and he did not let go of it. Get up off this floor, he said, low. You will never kneel in front of me. Not once, not ever. Do you understand me? Poppy woke in the back booth then. She rubbed her eyes with both fists, saw the strange man holding her mama's hand, and this was the thing Nora never forgot. She did not scream. She just watched, calm and steady, the way small children watch things the adults haven't figured out yet. Who did this to you? Theo said. Not to Nora, to the whole room. Nobody answered. The silence stretched until it hurt. Then Poppy's small voice rang out, clear as a struck bell from the back booth. The man who ran away. He pushed my mama, and my mama's head hit the counter, and she said a bad word she tells me not to say. A breath of something almost like a laugh went through Nora's chest, cracked and helpless. Theo turned his head slowly toward the rear door, where table 9 hung in his man's grip, sweating, and the fear in that man's face became a living, twitching thing. And Nora, who had spent 31 years being the invisible woman that things simply happened to, the shorted check, the shove, the late rent, the padlock at 6 in the morning, understood in that one suspended moment that she had just become the single most protected woman in the city. And she had absolutely no idea yet what that protection was going to cost her. He didn't hurt table 9. That was the first thing that surprised her. He had the man's wallet photographed, his home address on Cerro Street written down, and then he had him driven home with a promise so soft it froze what was left of the room. You will never come near this place, this woman or that child again. If you do, you and I will have a much longer conversation, and you will not enjoy it. The man left on his own 2 shaking feet. Nora never saw him again. Then Theo Corrigan paid Dale's back rent. All of it 6 months forward, in cash, in a plain envelope that Dale's hands trembled too hard to hold. And he sat down in booth 4, his dead brother's booth, and ordered black coffee, no sugar, and the meatloaf, and asked Nora quietly if she would sit across from him for a minute. She sat. It felt like sitting down across from weather. How much do you owe? He asked. That's not. How much? $1,100 on the apartment, she said. And there's the folder under my mattress. Poppy's fever spiked to 104 in March, and the R kept her overnight. $860, a payment plan I'm 3 months behind on. Last week, they sent a letter with a number for something called a collections partner. She stared at the formica. I stopped opening the windowed envelopes. Like if I don't read the number, it can't come true. I'm sorry, you didn't ask for my life story. Danny sat in this exact seat for 11 months, Theo said, turning the coffee cup a slow half circle on the formica, and told me nothing about his. I have almost a year of his kindness stacked up inside me, and no one left to hand it to. Let me, it wasn't a question. So for the next 2 weeks, he came every Thursday. He never once touched her past that first bleeding hand. He asked about the leak in the bathroom ceiling and the deadbolt on the apartment door. And things simply began to get better in ways Nora couldn't refuse fast enough to stop. A new furnace, installed on a Monday by two polite men who wouldn't take her money, so Poppy no longer had to sleep in her bed for the heat. A warmer coat, small and purple, draped over Poppy's chair one morning with no note. A scholarship letter from Ashfield Day School, the good one across town, the one with the garden, for a child who had never applied. She tried to give that one back. She stood at booth 4 with the letter held out and her jaw set. This is too much. I can't ever pay this. Theo looked at her over the rim of the cup. Danny gave you $40 on a $9 check for 11 months and never let you pay him back either. It runs in the family. Sit down, Nora. That was the first fragment. She caught the rest of him slowly, one Thursday at a time, the way you learn the shape of a dark room by touch. Danny had been the soft brother, Theo the hard one. Their father had run these streets, and when the old man was gunned down outside a restaurant called Salvo's on 9th in 1998, Theo, 19 years old, had taken the whole weight onto his own back so that Danny wouldn't have to. One Thursday, Theo set something on the formica between them, a battered brass lighter, the initials scratched almost smooth. This was my father's. It was in his coat the night they shot him. I was the one who went through his pockets. He flicked it open, shut open, a nervous ritual worn into his thumb. I built the walls so Danny could live inside them. That was the deal I made with myself. He gets to be the good one. I'll be whatever the streets need me to be, and he never has to know how it's paid for. His jaw worked, and he died anyway. 8 months ago, they told me it was a robbery gone wrong on Delancey Street. A mugging. I have never believed it for one single day. He looked down at the watch on her wrist. I've spent 8 months and a fortune trying to find the truth, and a waitress I never met just walked up and handed me his watch and told me he was happy on Thursdays. Do you know what that's worth? There's no number. And Nora did the thing that no one had done to Theo Corrigan in 20 years. She reached across the width of booth 4 and laid her hand flat over the lighter. He went completely, utterly still. A man who could clear a room with a glance, frozen by the touch of a waitress's hand. He wasn't a wall to me, she said softly. He was just Danny, who liked meatloaf and tipped too much and worried about a stranger sleeping enough. You don't have to be a wall in here either. Not in booth 4. Not on Thursdays. In here you can just be Theo. He didn't pull his hand away. He looked at it for a long time, like it belonged to someone else. Poppy was the one who truly broke him, though, and none of them planned that. She adopted him, started saving him her red crayon, because you look like a red crayon person. They're the serious ones, but they're actually nice. She drew him a picture, a lopsided house with 4 stick people out front and a smiling yellow sun, and pressed it into his big hands with total confidence. And Theo Corrigan, whose name was a warning across 3 neighborhoods, folded that crayon, drawing carefully into his breast pocket. Nora saw it there weeks later, worn soft along the creases from being taken out and looked at. One Thursday, Poppy fell asleep against his arm mid-sentence, and Theo didn't move for 40 minutes, didn't shift, didn't reach for his phone, barely breathed, so as not to wake her. Nora watched from the counter and felt something in her own chest that she had shut off years ago come quietly, dangerously, back on. But the warmth was loading a mine underneath the whole time. Because someone was watching the diner. A grey sedan parked across Marlow Street, 3 separate nights that week, engine off, no one getting out. Because a man named Victor Rohn, Theo's own underboss, his second the very man he had personally assigned to investigate Danny's robbery, had started asking around the neighborhood about the waitress with the dead man's watch. And because the watch it was about to turn out was never just a watch, Nora found the seam by accident, polishing the scratched crystal with her apron on a slow afternoon. A thin folded slip of paper dropped out from behind the face and drifted to the counter. Numbers, a date. Beneath them, a small crest inked in Danny's cramped hand, a shape she didn't recognize and would never forget. And 3 words in that same familiar handwriting, that stopped her heart cold. Roan sold me. She was still standing there holding it, fingers gone numb, when headlights swept slow across the front window at 11:42 p. M and Poppy, at the glass with her nose against it, said in a small, clear voice, "Mama, that's the grey car again." Nora didn't call Theo. That was her first real act of her own life. She was afraid that if she showed him the paper cold, he'd do something loud and immediate that put Poppy in the middle of it. So she folded the slip carefully back inside the watch, settled Poppy in the back booth with the coloring book and a warning to stay put, and she stood behind the counter with her spine straight and waited to see what the grey car wanted from her. Victor Roan walked in alone, silver at the temples, an easy salesman's smile, a gun she couldn't see but knew was riding under the left side of that coat. "You're the famous waitress," he said, sliding onto a counter stool like an old friend. "The one with Danny's watch. You've made quite the impression on the boss. Never seen him take to anyone." He set a thick envelope on the counter between them, unhurried. "I'll be straight with you, sweetheart, because I think you're smart. That watch is a problem for a lot of people. Danny was a sentimental fool who wrote things down that were better left unwritten. So here's $10,000 cash tonight. You hand me the watch, you and the kid get on a bus somewhere warm, and the Corrigans become a thing that happened to you once. And if I say no," Nora said. Roan's smile didn't waver by a millimeter. "Then you're a woman with a dead man's watch, a rent she can't pay, and a little girl who likes red crayons. Things happen to women like that. Sad things, and nobody's ever surprised when they do." He tapped the envelope twice with one manicured finger. "The boss is a busy man. He can't stand guard over you every hour of every day. But I can find you in the 5 minutes he isn't looking. Take the money. Be smart." There it was, the second dead end, and far darker than the first, because the danger wasn't a stranger from Table 9 anymore. It was inside the walls Theo had built. It was the one man in the world Theo trusted with finding his brother's killer, and he was the killer, sitting on a stool in her diner, and he had just put a price on her daughter's head. "I need a day," Nora said. Her voice came out level, and she never understood how. "To think about it. Smart girl, you've got until tomorrow night." Roan stood, smoothed his coat, and let his eyes drift to the back booth, where Poppy sat coloring, tongue between her teeth. Cute kid, red crayon. Kids get so attached to the little things. He left $3 on the counter for a coffee he never ordered and walked out into the dark. Nora locked the front door with hands she couldn't feel. Then she did the second thing she was proud of for the rest of her life. She slid the paper out of the watch, and she photographed both sides under the counter lamp with her cracked phone. And she emailed the images to 3 separate places. Her own account, a lawyer named Ruiz, whose business card Danny had once left folded inside a $40 tip, and a public defender's anonymous tip line she found in 90 seconds of searching. Insurance. If something happened to her tomorrow night, the truth wouldn't die on her wrist. And then she called Theo, not to be rescued, to warn him. It was Roan, she said the instant he picked up. Danny knew Theo. He knew before he died, and he hid it inside the watch. "Listen to me. Do not come here tonight. Don't tip your hand. Don't move on him hot. He's expecting a scared little waitress, so let me stay scared right where he can see me. Come Thursday. Come to booth 4 like it's any other Thursday and nothing's wrong. And bring the one person you trust that isn't him." There was a long, heavy silence on the line. "You've had this in your hand," Theo said slowly, "and you didn't run." "I ran my whole life," Nora said. "From every man who ever raised his voice. Danny didn't tell me to run and hide from you. He told me to find you. I think that means I'm supposed to be family now, not luggage you carry to safety." She looked at Poppy asleep in the booth, red crayon fallen from her open hand. "I'm done being the woman things happen to, Theo." Another breath. When Theo spoke again, the old iron was back in his voice, but pointed now, aimed like a blade. "Thursday, booth 4. Keep the watch on your wrist where he can see it, so he thinks he still has time and the leverage." And Nora, a pause. If he lays one finger on you before then, he won't. He wants that watch quiet and clean. She almost laughed. He has no idea it's already in 3 inboxes. She hung up, and across Marlow Street, the grey sedan pulled away from the curb at last, but it didn't leave the block. It rolled down half a street to where it could still see the diner's front door, and it settled in to wait out a deadline that Nora had never for 1 second intended to keep. Thursday, 6:12 p.m. Booth 4. Roan came in early because men who believe they've already won always arrive early. He expected a waitress alone with an answer and an envelope's worth of terror. Poppy was 2 blocks away with Dale's sister, safe. What he found was Theo Corrigan sitting in booth 4. Black coffee, no sugar, meatloaf untouched. Roan stopped dead in the middle of the checkered floor. "Boss," he said, recovering fast, smiling. "Didn't know you'd be gracing us tonight." "Sit," Theo said. Roan sat. 2 of his own men drifted in behind him and took the door. He'd come loaded. The room pulled tight as piano wire. "You wanted to know who sold Danny to Delancey Street," Roan said, smooth. "I've finally got a real lead for you." "I know you do." Theo turned his coffee cup a slow half-turn. "Nora, show him." This was the part Nora had built herself alone at 3 in the morning. She didn't hand over the watch. She reached under the counter, stood her cracked phone up against the napkin holder, and pressed play. Roan's own voice filled the diner. $10,000 cash tonight. Things happen to women like that. Cute kid, red crayon. She'd recorded the whole visit, the phone in her apron the entire time. Roan's easy face came apart at the seams. His hand dove for his coat, and Nora, who had never held a weapon, whose hands shook carrying a tray, did the thing she'd rehearsed 100 times in the dark. She ripped the fire extinguisher off its bracket and blasted it point blank into his face, white and roaring, and Theo came up out of booth 4 into the blind fog. Chairs went over, a fist landed, glass, Roan firing blind into the ceiling with plaster raining down like snow, and then Theo had him face down on the checkered floor, knee in his back. The gun kicked 6 feet away under a table. His 2 men were down and held. Nora had torn Poppy's drawing off the wall, thrown herself flat behind the counter, and slammed her palm onto the silent alarm Dale had wired in after the last robbery. She did not scream. She did not freeze. And through the front window, blue and red light washed across the diner in waves, because Nora's photos had reached one more place. That public defender's tip line carried a name, an FBI task force that had wanted Victor Roan for 2 years. Theo looked up at her over Roan's ruined, streaming face, chest heaving. "You didn't wait for me," he said. "No," Nora said, still on the floor, still clutching a 6-year-old's drawing of a house with 4 people in it. "Danny didn't send me a bodyguard. He sent me to a brother. I figured that made me family, not luggage." She swallowed hard. Families fight back. And Victor Roan, blind and cuffed and screaming that she was nobody, that she was just a waitress, turned his head and saw the scratched watch on her wrist, and understood at last exactly what Danny had hidden and who it was he had truly buried. Within a month, the dock men who'd worked with Roan were gone on federal holds. Roan himself was indicted for Danny's murder and 2 years of federal counts, and the last anyone heard he sat in a cell with no easy smile left in him, awaiting trial. Justice came quiet, on paper, through courts, the way Danny would have wanted, since Danny had written it all down. But that's the plumbing. Here's what mattered. 6 weeks later, Theo came to Bellamy's on a Thursday, and did not sit in booth 4. He stood in the doorway with an envelope, and Nora knew before he opened it what it was. "The diner's yours," he said. He set the deed on the counter and laid a ring of keys beside it. "Bought it, signed it over. $1, which you overpaid because you already gave Danny 11 months of Thursdays." He drew a breath. "And this is the part I hate saying. You don't owe me a thing. Not a coffee, not a Thursday, not a hand over mine. The men who hurt you are gone. You're free. Take Poppy and go anywhere on earth, and no one will ever push you to a floor again as long as you live." He looked at her. The door's open. It's been open the whole time. Nora came around the counter, crying, not caring. "You know what Danny told me that last Thursday?" she said. "He said his brother built walls so someone else could live safe inside them, and that the saddest thing in the whole world was the man who builds the house and then stands outside it in the cold." She took his hand and turned it over, the way she'd wanted to since the first night. "Come inside, Theo. Sit in booth 4. Order the meatloaf and actually eat it this time." Her voice broke. "The door's open for you too." He sat, he ate the meatloaf. Poppy climbed up beside him, handed him the red crayon, and informed him he was still officially a red crayon person, and Theo Corrigan, feared across 3 neighborhoods, alone for 20 years, put his arm around a waitress and a 6-year-old in his dead brother's diner, and for the first time since he was 19, he stopped counting the exits. The scratched watch stayed on Nora's wrist. She never took it off. Danny's, then hers, and someday, she decided, Poppy's. Outside, across Marlowe Street, a long black car pulled slowly to the curb. Tinted windows, and on the door a crest, the same shape Danny had inked beneath his numbers. The one Nora had seen only once and never forgotten. Not Roan's, not the old man's, something older, from further away. The engine idled. Nobody got out. It just sat there in the dark, watching the diner where the most protected woman in the city laughed over meatloaf, and Theo saw it too, and his arm tightened, just slightly, around them both. Danny had written down who sold him. He'd never written down who they sold him to. That was Nora's story, a waitress who ran her whole life until a dead man's watch taught her to turn around and fight for the family she chose. If it moved you, tell me one thing in the comments. When Theo said the door's open, should she have walked through it, or was staying the bravest thing she ever did? Like this if it touched your heart. Share it with someone who needs reminding they're not luggage. And subscribe so you never miss another story like this.